Well, as we moved along the way, we had these loud, orange-colored big plastic sheets that the infantry would put on the ground, and the air could see it. If the cloud cover was so the Air Force could work. Then the tanks used them. They put them on the bank of a tank, and that way the Air Force people could see the tanks and tell where we are. Well, I told you about this sniper getting this buddy. Well, we had dug in and were pretty quiet, and we heard this digging out in front of us. Just slow digging. We knew what was happening, that we had a sniper moving in. Now this is a German flare gun, but what we did when we realized what we had in front of us there was a sniper. We fired a flare, and of course that exposed him, and of course that was the end of him. Otherwise he would have sat there and got several of us probably before we got him. But we moved on toward Bastogne, and after the experience we'd had digging in that frozen ground, I had an opportunity to get my hands on a big pick. And I had to pick that up and tied it with my pack on the back. Well, I had quite a load. And going by the little town of Wells, we were going along with the tanks, and the tanks had pressed that snow down, so if it went up a little bank, it was slick as glass. And I stepped on one of those and turned my ankle. Man, what a sprain. I could not walk. Well, I wound up being sent all the way back to General Hospital in France with that sprain, which was rather embarrassing. What I'd been through already, didn't get taken out with a sprain. I was kind of the laughing stock, but what I worried about coming back on the line, I thought some of my buddies might not be there, because they continued to fight, and they had or the 101st relieved, and that's when they were moving on towards the Maginot and Siegfried line. When I got back, they were approaching the Maginot line, and since I'd been out, and they said I'd been on vacation, they assigned me the flamethrower. Flamethrower looked like a garden spray can, a garden, what do you call it, sprayer.
Yeah, sprayer.
Yeah, filled with that jelly. And the idea is you would ease up to a pillbox and light that thing and spray that jelly in there to make them shut up that, well, I mean, that was certain death, but that was my assignment. Luckily, then again, luck was in my favor. They decided, I think, to avoid the pillboxes and go around them or something. I've forgotten just how that turned out. But the Maginot line and the Siegfried line turned out to be not a real obstacle to us. I don't recall any particular major problem that caused us. Then that's how we moved on to the Rhine from there. So let me pick up at Wiesbaden and move to Kassel, and that's where the guys moved out in the street. Now, when we left that little village, or wherever the name of that place, we moved north, and our assignment was to move on to meet the Russians. Well, I wasn't in the advance group, and I wasn't point man on that attack as we went up the hill. But luckily,
Okay, yeah, just stop and get some water, and then pick back up just before you stop. They'll edit just fine.
anyway, we're going up this hill along a road outside of Kassel, leading toward Berlin. And there we knew the Germans were well fortified just over the hill, along the hill. The 6th and 9th Division rolled up. New division, hadn't been in combat before. new shiny equipment, shiny uniforms. Said we'll take over. We had to get off the road, get out in the field. The officer in charge of the 6th and 9th outranked our officer. He ordered us off the road, out of the way. Well, bless their hearts, we didn't object because they were relieving us. Boy, in a few minutes when they went over that hill, I thought the earth was coming apart. And sure enough, here came the casualties back pretty fast. But then we moved south from there to a little town of Gina and Gera, and I'm not sure of the pronunciation. But the town of Gera, we had some soldiers in the hospital, some German soldiers in the hospital, so we had to clear the hospital. While I was there, the administrator of the hospital spoke English, and he cornered me one day and he said, I don't know why you Americans are fighting us. We'll be allied with you, with the Russians, in a matter of a few months. Well, I didn't argue with him, but I knew that that was a possibility. But anyway, we swung south from there, and they went on, and they were the ones that met the Russians. We swung south down to Nuremberg. We camped in Nuremberg, and we camped around the swimming pool where the Olympics were held in '36. Then we moved on south, across the Blue Danube into Austria, and then wound up meeting the Russians down the Enns River. And we got the ceasefire order either 7th or the 8th. I say the 8th, but some in the literature say the ceasefire came down on the 7th. All I know, we were quite happy that that happened. And I'll pick up there to tell what happened after the shooting started. One time in the Reserve Forest, a squad of us captured a German group, 80 men and 1 woman. And the leader of that group had this Luger. And my friend Sergeant Worse took the Luger from him and handed it to me and said, Frank, here's your Luger. That's where I got that. Here's a German helmet, and I notice now that our helmets are kind of patterned after this.
Cut. Sorry about that.
Another episode in the Reserve Forest back there. I reckon it was before the balls. We dreaded being in the forest because when they shelled us, those shells would explode and hit the treetops, and just the shrapnel would just scatter down all over you. So we really dreaded being in timber when they started shelling us. But to clear that forest, we lined up along the edge of it and started through it about 10 yards apart. Well, we didn't know it, but they were dug in so well and so camouflaged, we didn't see them. But we're easing along, and finally, again, Worse was on my right. He hollered at me, and he could see from the side. He said, Frank, look out, you're about to step on one. And sure enough, there it was right in front of me. Well, I put on my best German and said, come and see out with the hands roof. Well, after about 3 times, I'm pleading with him. He finally put up his hands and came out. Well, the rule was, if we were trustworthy, they didn't have a weapon, we could say, put your hands on your head or show them, and then just march them, start them towards your back. Well, this young man, I started him and pointed away, and he went on back. Well, when he got back there to the fellas in the back that was receiving him, he wasn't moving quite enough to shoot this one guy. So he wrapped him across the shoulders with his, being in the red line, all he carried one of the little carbine rifles. He wrapped him across the back with that. And boy, they stopped giving up when they saw that. But later, after pleading with them, we didn't have a fight. They gave up. We didn't lose a man. Didn't get anybody hurt. But that night, I recognized the guy. I looked him up, and I said, "That was my friend." When that young man raised his hand, he was my friend, and you abused him. Now let me tell you, you back here, I'm on the front line. I'll shoot you and have no qualms about it if I ever see you mistreat another soldier that has given up. He is my friend. He's some GI's friend. And I believe he got the message. I mean, I meant what I said. Because I was, you don't feel like your life's worth a dime. Anyway, we captured those German motorcycles and just ride them to the end because he didn't feel like where you lived for the next day anyway. While I'm paused, I need to tell you a little about my jacket. This jacket kind of tells you my history. In that I was in the Army. This is an Army jacket. I served overseas. I think each one of these represents 6 months. Overseas 6 months. And I think I've got this is a patch for the 8th Division. This is a patch that the Blue Ridge Division was formed up in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and in the Blue Ridge Mountains is what that represents, it Blue Ridge Division. After the shooting stopped, they started the trials in Nuremberg, the war criminal trials. So they tapped, in our unit, they came and got those of us that were 6'10" to 6 feet tall. And they said the English are showing us up at the trials at Nuremberg. We've got to get more flashy, so we want guys the same size. Come on, we'll dress you up. Well, guard duty was low on my priority. So we could show up in Nuremberg, and that's the 1st Division. So I'm assigned to the 1st Division for that. The 1st Division, I think Belgium gave them this decoration here. And these represent the combat infantry badge is a badge that given us that's in combat. And these ribbons, I'm not sure I'm familiar with all of these, but these 3 stars mean that that's a European ribbon. And that's a victory ribbon there. This is, of course, the Purple Heart, good conduct, so forth. And somewhere, I don't think it's on this. Yeah, here it is. Now here's a prize medal right here. I call a ruptured duck. That's given to you when you're discharged. You're through when you get the ruptured duck. So that's what that represents. Anyway, this jacket kind of tells my story. I don't know, this little pride and joy here with a swastika on it and the flag just picked up somewhere. I told you about the lady at the hotel that just had a hysterical history. I mean, she just became berserk when the worst told her that I was not going to establish. In that same hotel, I think before that episode, they were serving a meal, and we roamed all through the hotel. Well, I went by the table, and there was bread on the table. I just reached over and got a slice of bread. You would have thought that I had committed a murder or something. Boy, she just threw a fit. So I gave her one of my K rations. Now these are K rations, a breakfast, dinner, and supper. Now when you got K rations, now the rations they brought up from the cooks prepared, that was called C rations, I think. But these were the K rations we carried in our packs, and I managed to come home with 3. And my brother couldn't take it. My brother, he was an executive at Dow Chemical Company. He was a chemist. And he was involved in developing butadiene that was substitute for rubber. So he volunteered for the Navy. But when the authorities at Dow found out about it, they contacted War Department and got him deferred because said he is too valuable for our national defense in this production of, the substitute rubber. So he did not have to go, but he was curious about my service, and when I got home and all with this, he couldn't stand it. He opened up those K-Rices to see what's in there. And of course, there's a little chocolate bar, there's cigarettes in there, and all. So it's a pretty good meal. It's better than the other kind of rations. Of course, the canteen. The Germans, they got at the end, they printed all that money. You get a million marks there pretty easy. And that's a picture there of when you dug in the snow. See, the Germans had snowsuits. They had snowsuits.
Okay, let me hand this, as you talk about your things,
Okay.
let me hand them to you.
Okay. All
So
right.
you can kind of point out things,
Okay.
okay? So this, you
All right.
this here now, is that what you wanna?
Yeah, okay.
So you can just hold that toward the camera,
Okay.
and then, that will be good.
There's a picture, typical of when you dug in the snow. We had those dark uniforms. Like I was telling you about, we went into that attack at night when we got pinned down. They were wearing those dark uniforms, and man, we were just a sitting duck, sure enough. But that's a pretty typical picture of what it looked like once we dug in.
Okay. We can just take these items as you wanna talk about them.
Okay, this is a map here of how the 80th Division, how the 80th Division moved, coming in at Omaha Beach here in Omaha Beach, and then moved across France. And then there's the Moselle. It's right after they crossed the Moselle when I joined the unit. And here's this St. Avold, just south of Metz in there. Here's the Maginot and Siegfried Line. So what did Hitler do when he got ready to launch the balls? He just went around it. Yeah. Then that swung went up to Kassel, then swung south from there on down to Austria and met the Russians down on the Inn River. So that's just a brief map of the route of the 8th Division. The awards there was
These?
well, I've already talked a little about that. Yeah, we got here good conduct medal and the European. Now, I didn't talk about the star, that bronze star there. Now, that squad of us that supplied and captured 80 soldiers and one lady. I suppose she'd be called a lady. Anyway, that. I call it the Zerf Forest is where that happened. But I admit I cannot find the term Zerf Forest on the map, so I don't know. And that's my picture there. I was the youngest fellow in my unit, and you can tell what a young fellow I was there.
Do you have an idea of about the year that was made, approximately the year that picture was made?
Well, it would be made before I was discharged. It'd be made before April of 45.
So 45?
Yeah, no, April of 46. It'd be made before 46. See, I was in the Army of Occupation a year. I think I was talking about in the Reserve Forest. We moved through that forest and came out out in the open, just almost dark. into this little town, and the people they did not know where we were German or Americans. But when they discovered we were Americans, all those white flags stuck out those windows. They just shot them out those windows, which we were glad. We moved out the edge of town and dug in because we realized we were behind German lines. So sure enough, about 2 o'clock in the morning, see, the Germans had occupied those other countries like Bulgaria and Hungary and all those, and they had horse-drawn artillery. About 2 o'clock in the morning, here came the horses and the artillery, and it came quite a convoy. Well, the road came down and circled down into this little town. Well, we waited till they got there where they're turning and coming down into town, and we could see the end of the convoy. So we opened up on them and, of course, killed the horses and probably some of the soldiers, but the ones that could ran and got in the woods off to our right. The next morning, they showed up with a tank, and to sight the tank, they had to back it up and line it up that way, and they fired. And our tank, next to where I had dug in, right next to me was a tank, and the commander of that tank, squad or whatever they call them in tank, he was standing outside with his binoculars directing fire. And would you believe that tank hit the building right above where he was standing and killed him? I thought, man, get in this hole with me if you. But he stood there, and I didn't understand that, and killed him. Well, would you believe those people turned out when the firing kind of stopped? They turned out butchering those horses for meat. I mean, they just swarmed over those horses, beat them. Order came down that night for the guy with the. Now, the difference is TD and tanks. TD is a tank destroyer. It's a lightweight, fast-moving, but with a heavy gun. It's got an 88 or something on it. But, of course, tank is heavy armor. But the TD is a fast-moving, so they gamble on it moving fast. Well, this commander that had brought us came through the forest with, they ordered him back through that forest to go back, and he said, that's suicide. And he refused the order. Well, when the next morning, when things cleared out after that convoy and all, and things settled down, MPs showed up and arrested him and carried him off. So he had refused an order. So that happened.
Do you recall his name by any chance?
No. You don't get named like that. You just say yeah.
Yeah.
So after the shooting stopped, the Russians wanted that heavy equipment that we had captured. We had a lot of self-propelled weapons, artillery pieces. We had a field full of them down there next to the Enns River. And the Russians wanted them. So they thought by intimidating us, by firing over our heads and all, that we'd run off and they could move across the river and get to the equipment. But we didn't budge and said, well, it looks like we're going to have a battle with the Russians. But we had to have a passing review for the Russian general at some point. Some general came down and they talked, and then we had to have a passing review for the Russian general. And that was interesting, even though boring. Standing at attention for a long time is not, that's for the birds. But I think I had told you that those of us were 5'10" or 6 feet. They had sent to Nuremberg for the trial, and that's when I was put in the 1st Division. Well, guard duty was something I just detested. But it had to go. It had to be. I understood that. But anyway, I asked for a transfer from that. As I look back on it now, it had been a little more historical than what they sent me. They sent me to a grave registration outfit. We were under orders to move any dead American back into France, Holland, or Belgium. President Roosevelt had ordered no American soldier would be buried on German soil. So that was our mission. Well, I told you about when I first went in, I was in the Transportation Corps, which meant I had, and then I had taken after, something I missed saying, after the shooting stop, I took a little mechanics course. They offered us opportunity to do something on our spare time. We were at an airfield down in Austria, and I thought we learned to fly, so we had a pilot with us that would teach us. Well, we got as far along, we started some of the book work, and I did learn when you approach an airfield in the air, you circle it, keeping it to your left. That's all I remember about air travel. But anyway, with this mechanic somewhat background, in this grade registration outfit, they got us together. I was assigned the motor pool, a PFC with 35 vehicles, 48 men, and I'm in charge, a PFC. They froze all promotions after the shooting stopped. So there I was. But never was my authority challenged. So anyway, that was interesting. And from that, I didn't have enough points. You had points based on your time there and so forth to come home with my unit. It was after that, then I'll be able to come home. The Germans were quite, Hitler had them so worked up. This is an armband that they wore, and the dads would brag about sometimes, ich son gefallen for the Führer. They're proud that their son got killed in action, so forth. Anyway, I came home April, was discharged April the 25th, and there's my discharge right there if you want me to hold it. And there's a Purple Heart.
When you do this introduces it, and then I'll make a close-up.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and talk about it one more time now. Tell us what
I was discharged on April 25th, 46. And that's a copy of my discharge right there. Okay. The guy was interviewing me. They had to have a little session when you're being discharged. And he was giving me all these promises. He said, now, if you re-enlist, you can go back into your same unit with your same rating, your same rank. I said, friend, look at my unit and my rank. I don't believe I want to go back for that. He turned red at a beat. Yeah. I'd served my country, and I thought I served it well, the best I could, so forth. Anyway, did I raise any question in your mind?
Well, sure. You had several bad days. Let's talk for just a minute about luck. It seems like luck is kind of the theme that runs through your service. If you wouldn't mind, just kind of tell us what role luck played in your tour, because it sounds like on several occasions you were in a situation that you could have easily been killed or wounded.
One incident I didn't tell about that just occurred to me. Again, I was, and I don't know just now how this placed in it, but we were in connection with this forest, along this forest deal. We moved out, and I was the point man again on this. And we were going through these, in the forest, the Germans cut fire lanes. Anyway, we went kind of a hill, and we went up it to this was undergrowth that had, they'd cut it over, it had grown back. So for some reason, being an old farm boy, I carried pliers in my pocket. And being a point man, I got up there and I looked, there was a German artillery emplacement just down the hill. And I knew that likely we'd just move on through and take it out and move on. So I cut the fence, laid it back. I had it ready for us to go. And I sent word back that where I was and what the situation was. But for some reason, the battalion commander came up, and on his own, he took off down one of those fire lanes. He thought he'd find a pathway, and of course he got down there and got into a machine gun nest, and they cut him up pretty badly. But he lived, and later I went to an 80th reunion, and he was there. I couldn't believe that he had lived, but he said, yeah, he went back and was back on the line. I said, I can't believe that. But later in the day, we got orders to take out the machine gun nest. Well, worst again, he said, Frank, I'll go down one side. And a guy named Tom Jackson had the Browning automatic. He carried the Browning automatic, which is it's an automatic rifle that shoots a shell about the size of an M1. Anyway, he says, you and Tom go down the other side. Oh, me? I said, well, this is it. Well, I was watching Hank across the opening. He was on the other side. And I saw him all of a sudden started firing, and he was in a crouched position, but from that crouched position till he hit the ground, he fired all 8 rounds in his clip. That's how fast he fired them. Well, we moved on down, and when we got near that machine gun, he opened up on us. Now you talk about luck. Tom was going like this, and I'm beside him. They opened up that machine and cut the belt off of him. The belt that was his ammunition belt, cut it off his side. In other words, the bullets went between us. Well, he opened up and fired, and then he hit the ground and went into shock, crying like a baby. He was in such shock, realizing how close he had come. Well, I pulled a hand grenade, pulled a pin and threw a hand grenade in there. And but these fir trees, the limbs are right down on the ground. But when they fire, they opened up. Now, you're talking about luck. The machine gun operator, we were trained in machine gun that you kind of move it. If he'd have moved that thing a half inch either way, he got us both. But anyway, I sent the message back that we may have knocked them out or may not, I don't know. But we need to send some help. So they sent the 3rd platoon around, and I could hear them coming through the brush. And I'm kind of vague as to what happened. I know we spent the night right there in that hole. And the next morning, we went another direction. But anyway, that's one episode I had failed to tell you. Now look, well, I don't know why I'm here. And of the episodes I've told you, you can see why I question why I'm here. Now, maybe I was spared for a reason. I've tried to honor that by being a good man, try to be a good Christian man. Maybe I was spared. I don't know. But there's no human explanation as to why I'm here. I'm honored, I'm pleased, and I've been able to live a good life. Went to school, got a postgraduate degree, worked in the public schools for 20 years. My wife's a teacher. We've had a good life. Had 2 children, smart as they can be. They're both artists. And we have 3 granddaughters. I just had a good life. And still, I'll be 83 in a few days. And whoever thought, my dad died at 78, so I feel like I'm on borrowed time. But I came home, this had nothing to do with my armed service, but I came home and went right to work back on the ranch. I liked it. Finally, after about 3 or 4 months, Dad called me aside one day and said, Frank, you can't make a living here. I know you love the ranch, and I'm glad, but things have changed. They grow in the crops in West Texas now with the big machinery. We grow in the cattle. We can't compete. Things are changing. You can't make a living here, so you got to go to school. So I came down to Sam, and years later, I'm still going to school. But anyway, that's kind of my story. Did I prompt any more questions?
Do you have any recommendations to high school students who are interested in the military? Would you have any recommendations to those girls or boys?
I think it's wonderful that some feel a patriotic pull to step forward and want to do something to defend the country. I would probably have volunteered, but I was actually drafted. I would have probably volunteered along with your buddies. The Army situation, the buddy system really works. Even in battle, in a sense, you find yourself fighting for your buddies. In a sense, you form such a bond that you want to fight for them. And of course, in our situation, we knew what our mission was: get it over with and get home and put this dictator, ruthless dictator, out of business. The poor guys in Iraq, I feel so sorry for them. They don't know who the enemy is. Another case, it just occurred to me, I didn't tell you about, during the war, the most frightened I think I ever was is when I discovered they had dropped German soldiers in American uniforms behind us. I found part of one of their uniforms, and that really frightened me. And I think about those poor guys in Iraq. They got them behind them all the time. So no wonder so many of them are having mental problems because of the stress. That's true. I think you have to, the military is a great organization. The discipline and the satisfaction that comes from it. I'm just amazed at young people that are willing, and of course all of our service now are volunteers, which means there's a pull there that really we don't completely understand, but just a love of country and love for humanity and want to do what's right and to take action. It's something of the pioneer spirit. But as far as any outright recommendation, I just admire that anybody that wants to serve. As I just told you, I didn't volunteer to re-enlist. In fact, when the Korean War, Dr. Query, my math professor at the university, was in the Air Force, and he talked to some of us about going in and work with him. And I was about to do it because I wasn't about to go back in the infantry. And my brother came up here, and we were living in Woodward at the time. Lynn and I both went to Woodward to teach in 1950. he came and talked me out of it, which I've been glad.
I got one final question. Did your religious convictions play a role in your military service?
I felt might be one reason, of course, other guys prayed. But when Mickey really got in that hole with me, when they hit that water can, he's a Catholic boy. He said he'd never prayed very much, but we prayed. Now, were prayers answered or not,